Old folks' inheritance is all ours. Right after my husband Clay passed away, the first words flung at me by our eldest son Alex and his wife, who hadn't even shown their faces at the hospital. Even while we were alive, Alex and his spouse avoided us, never dropping by our family home. As I stood there dumbfounded, his wife Becky laughed mockingly. "My condolences." The words Becky whispered to me set my resolve, the two of them laughing creepily before me. They're only laughing for now. The preparations to send them plummeting into hell were already complete. My name is Maddie, turning 73 this year. Clay, in his youth, started a business from nothing and made it a success. He still reigns supreme over it. A man who worked hard to accumulate wealth, yet he was never stingy with money and was a kind husband to me. We have only one son between us, Clay and I. We hope to be surrounded by many children, but children are a blessing one cannot control. Unfortunately, our only child was our eldest son, Alex. Perhaps because of that, we feel we might have overindulged him. Now Alex has married Becky and is standing on his own. They don't live with us, but they reside in the high-rise condo Clay gifted them as a wedding present. Clay chose the high-rise close to our home, probably so we could visit each other easily. However, there are always miscalculations in everything. Clay's miscalculation was not fully understanding Becky's character. Alex's wife, Becky, had a sharp personality. Right from the first meeting, she was so unabashedly forward that it took us aback. After they married, nothing changed. She was straightforward with her complaints and had many demands. For instance, she wanted to change the interior of the high-rise they were provided with almost immediately, and demanded we cover the cost as they were still newlyweds. Both Clay and I were speechless. Becky's argument was that it was still within the cancellation period, but when purchasing the high-rise, there was no particular input from Alex and Becky. Perhaps they were too preoccupied with wedding preparations and the honeymoon. Alex said, "I thought it would be fine as long as I left it to Mom and Dad." But, "It's not to my liking. Becky isn't happy with it." That was his stance. Eventually, they moved out of the high-rise condo, and until the interior renovation was complete, they stayed at a hotel. We suggested they could stay with us for a while, since we were close by, but Becky vehemently opposed this idea. Apparently, a condition of their marriage was that they would absolutely not live with us. When I pressed Alex for more details, he was evasive, so I suspect there was more to it. We ended up covering the hotel costs during their renovation period. Becky became a housewife after getting married, quitting her job. She seemed to enjoy her newlywed life in luxury, staying at the hotel while rushing the interior decorators to finish the renovation. Of course, living in a hotel means no need to bother with household chores. It must have felt like heaven. But having to cut that short, I wouldn't be surprised if she was upset. "Isn't it great that the renovations are done quickly? Staying at a hotel forever would be inconvenient, right?" I tried to cheer up a sullen Becky. Then she glared at me and sighed heavily. Since the beginning of their marriage, this indicated to me that a typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict was on the horizon. Alex and Becky moved back to the high-rise condo near our home. I thought it was normal for families living so close to visit each other, but there was no such interaction, not even a phone call. It felt pointless to live so close without any communication. Clay felt the same loneliness. "You should come visit us sometimes," so I suddenly suggested to Alex. "But Becky doesn't want to visit the family home. She says it's dreary and dislikes it." Alex replied without hesitation. "Dreary? What do you mean?" I couldn't help raising my voice. I heard a mocking chuckle from Alex over the phone. "You know, a house where only old people live feels dreary." I never imagined such words would come from Alex. For him, it was the home he was born and raised in. How could it suddenly become dreary? "Well, I'll show up for important occasions. Guess the next one will be Dad's funeral." I scolded Alex for his ominous talk, but it didn't seem to affect him. He wasn't inclined to reflect. And then the ominous words became reality. I received a call on a cold winter day that Clay had collapsed suddenly at a friend's house. By the time I got to the emergency hospital, it was too late. The doctor said it was heart failure, common in the cold winter days. Before leaving home, I contacted Alex and Becky, but there was no sign of them coming. I was left alone to handle the paperwork and contact the funeral home. In the end, Alex and Becky didn't show up at the hospital. When I called Alex to ask what happened, "We have work and can't just go to the hospital," his reply only fueled my anger. When I asked what Becky was doing, astonishingly, she was celebrating her mother's birthday at her own family's home. "We did let you know, though," Alex added at the end. By this time, Alex and Becky had been married for 5 years. Even after 5 years, Becky continued to act as if she wasn't a part of our family. She frequented her own family's home, hardly ever visiting us. Last year, they didn't show up for either Christmas or the summer holidays. I could feel my anger pent up over 5 years about to explode. After the funeral was over, and I had just caught my breath, Alex and Becky visited, which was unusual. It hadn't been long since Clay passed. I thought perhaps they'd had a change of heart and came out of concern, but that wasn't the case. "As soon as Clay passed, it's gotten even more gloomy and dreary here," Becky said, frowning as she entered the living room. With her back to Clay's photo, she looked around the room and let out an exaggerated sigh. Alex didn't even bother to glance at Clay's photo. No sign of concern for me either. Gestures that, if not spontaneous, are meaningless. I didn't prompt them. It would be futile anyway. "What brings you two here today? It's rare to see both of you visiting home together." As I served tea, Alex and Becky exchanged a creepy smile and glanced at each other. Alex's face had grown more spiteful over the years. I sighed inwardly. He wasn't always like this. He used to be a kinder child. "We've come to discuss something important today." After taking a sip of his tea, Alex began to speak more formally. "Something important? What might that be?" The communication between Alex and me had dwindled to almost nothing. I was clueless about what he wanted to say, tilting my head in confusion. Becky, looking irritated at my reaction, nudged Alex's arm and urged him. "Hurry up," she said. "What is it?" I asked Alex again. Then, "You're slow," he murmured irritably, so he said something unbelievable. "The old folks' inheritance is all ours." With a mocking smile, that's how Alex declared it. I was astounded. What on earth was this child talking about? I thought in dismay. "Huh? What are you saying?" My hands began to shake involuntarily. Probably my voice, too. Becky watched me with the look of someone watching something amusing, enjoying my confusion. "My condolences." Leaning in to see my trembling face, Becky said it, with a mean smirk. Her sarcastic condolences made my anger explode. "They avoided us all these years, and now that Clay is gone, they want his inheritance? Who are you to say such a thing? He hasn't been gone long." My tone was accusing, yet Alex and Becky just laughed at me. "It's important, so we thought we should settle it quickly. If you hoard it all, we might not get anything. After all, we hardly ever see you. Who knows what you might do?" Hearing Becky's side of the story left me speechless with disbelief. I couldn't believe how shamelessly she was trying to evade her own responsibility. Alex, acting as if he's the rightful heir and leader of this house, insisted it's natural for me to obey his decisions. Who filled his head with such nonsense? "Are you planning to demolish this house too? Selling the land will make money, right? Since you must be lonely, how about moving to a nursing home, where you'll have lots of company?" Becky flung a pamphlet of a nursing home in the next state at me. "The place is affordable on your person, So you'll need to pay the fees yourself. We can't afford it since we're both not working. Don't expect any help from us." Her words left me stunned, as if I had ever demanded money from Alex and Becky. I had no energy left to argue with them. After looking back and forth between their eerily smiling faces, "I understand," I replied. "I'll make sure the lawyers know that you two will inherit everything." I left those words behind and returned to my room. I could hear their cheers of delight at my announcement. Everything had become so ridiculous to me. I decided then to leave this house as soon as possible. With that settled, I went to bed early that night. I acted swiftly. I reached out to my brother and his wife and explained the situation. Then I secured a contract for a luxury senior apartment near their neighborhood. I was raised by wealthy parents, and my brother and I had inherited their estate. I had never needed to touch that inheritance because Clay had provided a life without want. I never thought I'd have to dip into that money now. Once Clay's belongings were settled, Alex and Becky's pressing "Get out" disgusted me, but by then, I had all my preparations done. The next day, I left the home I had shared with Clay. It was undeniably a bittersweet departure. Lingering in the garden, looking back at the house. "Hurry up and leave," Becky told me. "Then goodbye. Make sure you discuss everything thoroughly with the lawyer. I have renounced my claim. It's all yours to inherit." I burned the image of Becky, listening with irritation, into my memory. And, "No matter how much you plead, I will never help," I vowed. As I walked out the gate, I noticed someone who looked like a real estate agent approaching Becky. They were likely in a rush to sell the house. A quiet smile crossed my face. A month later, while preparing lunch, my mobile phone rang. Curious, I checked the caller ID. It was Alex. "Hello. Hello. Long time no talk. What's up?" I casually asked, only to be met with Alex's shout of anger. He must be frantic. He was speaking too fast, making it hard to understand. "Hey, don't shout. I can't understand you," I shouted back into the phone. "The inheritance from Dad. What happened to it?" I had expected them to realize sooner or later, but a month seemed a bit too leisurely. "Huh. You mean the inheritance? I've renounced it. It's none of my business. You two handle it however you like. Wasn't it you who initiated this?" I conveyed as calmly as possible, knowing it would only amplify Alex's anger and panic. A little bit of spite won't harm me, I thought. "It's not the time to be laid back. There's hardly any inheritance left. And what's with these debts?" "Oh, you didn't know?" Alex had probably thought he was inheriting $10 million. But ever since Alex married Becky and left the family home, things changed drastically. Clay's business hit a rough patch in its later years, suffering from recession and deceit from competitors, resulting in substantial debts. The only inheritance left from Clay was debt. Clay had always told me to renounce any inheritance because otherwise the debt would become mine. Of course, this was something I needed to convey to Alex too. But after getting married, Alex and his wife hardly ever visited, and important conversations never happened before Clay passed away. I initially intended to discuss everything properly with Alex and his wife. However, after witnessing their disrespectful attitude, I changed my mind. I lost all patience with Alex and Becky, who were scheming to monopolize the inheritance. "What are we supposed to do now? It seems like there are still payments left for the high-rise condo." Among Clay's debts was the remaining payment for the high-rise condo he gifted Alex and Becky. It was an amount they could never hope to cover. "That's why I'm telling you it has nothing to do with me. You're the ones living in the condo, and you decided to sell the family home, right?" As soon as Clay's affairs were settled, I was promptly kicked out of the house. Alex and his wife must have decided to sell the home even before consulting the lawyers. They must be struggling now that they've touched the inheritance and realized the debts, unable to renounce it. They brought this upon themselves. "You have to adjust to a lifestyle within your means now. Becky can start working, right? Surely you can find a place to live on your own. Alex mentioned they'd have to leave the high-rise condo if they couldn't keep up with the payments. Maddie, that's terrible. How could you do this to your own son? Becky, who had been listening to our conversation, interjected. Perhaps she thought she could make more progress than Alex. She melodramatically pleaded with tears about their plight. Maddie, you have assets in your name, right? You could give them to us. What use is it to you with so little time left? It's greedy and vulgar to hoard them. Becky's rant grew louder and more aggressive, her fake tears giving way to shouts. It was almost laughable how entitled she was. I couldn't fathom why I would have to give up my inheritance from my parents to them. Moreover, Becky even had the nerve to say that I had. Little time left, she said. Who would hand over their inheritance to someone like that? Thinking, well then be my guest. Becky, do you realize what you're saying? I doubt such persuasion would work on anyone. You two need to work together and figure it out. With that, I ended the call. Alex tried calling back several times, but I ignored him. I took the continuously ringing mobile phone to my brother's house. I couldn't set up the call block myself. My brother suggested I get a new mobile phone, and I agreed, quickly canceling my current one and acquiring a new phone and number. Alex and Becky didn't know my new address, and with the number changed, they'd have no way to contact me. As I looked at my new phone, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Without any means to contact me, Alex and Becky became desperate, running to the lawyer to try and find my whereabouts. I received a complaint from the lawyer about being harassed by them. I'm sorry for the trouble. Feel free to report them to the police. They are adults after all. I responded to the lawyer's complaint, making sure he understood not to divulge any information about me. Eventually, the lawyer did call the police. Feeling a bit guilty, I visited the lawyer's office to apologize, and there I unexpectedly encountered Becky. The first sight of her in a long while revealed she had drastically changed. Her face was swollen and pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Maddie, I finally found you, she exclaimed, her eyes shining as she clung to me. The intensity of her approach made me instinctively step back. The lawyer rushed out of his office in a panic. Weren't you taken away by the police? How can you not realize the trouble you're causing? I raised my voice, scolding Becky, but she was unrelenting, continuing to hurl insults. How could you hide like this? To leave your son and his wife struggling without any help? Becky's raging, spittle-flying tirade was unbearably hideous to witness. I was driven out by you two, and you were the ones who decided to inherit Clay's estate. Even when Clay wanted to discuss his inheritance and debts, you never visited. It's all your own doing. As Becky grew more agitated, I grew calmer, wondering how Alex could have chosen such a woman as his wife. But then again, perhaps it was our fault for raising Alex this way. That thought made me sigh deeply. It's not our fault. You and your dreary ways are to blame. Don't shift the responsibility. Becky began to accuse us of disliking her from the beginning of their marriage. Who's really shifting responsibility? Think about it. Can't you see it's the result of your own actions? Though it wasn't a conversation to have in public, I couldn't stay silent. Honestly, I believe Becky changed Alex, and hatred began to bubble within me. Becky scoffed at my words, maintaining her disdainful demeanor. Preaching now, are we? How great do you think you are as an old lady? You're the worst mother-in-law ever. Fortunately, the office staff called the police, and officers arrived climbing the stairs. Apparently, a restraining order was in place. Becky, having violated it, was taken away by the police. Even to the end, she showed no remorse, continuing to spew resentment towards me. After that incident, Alex and Becky were apparently evicted from the high-rise condo. They tried to stay put, but on the day Becky was taken to the police station, the building manager changed the locks. They were locked out, leaving behind all their essential belongings. Only after all this did Alex and Becky finally agree to leave. Their debt repayments were behind, and Becky had to find work, but it seemed to be futile. They soon reached out to a lawyer to discuss debt restructuring, who referred them to another firm. Becky tried to rely on her parents, but they refused to help due to the amount of debt. I hear Becky's brother and his wife live nearby, but they couldn't shoulder unnecessary debts either. I hope they reflect on their past and start living within their means. As for me, I'm enjoying my life now. While cherishing my memories with Clay, I've started trying things I never could before. One of them is attending a computer class. I decided to learn video editing. No matter my age, I feel uneasy without something to do. Since attending the computer class, I've made friends my age and increased my interactions with younger people. Though I miss Clay, I see this as a start of my second life, and I intend to enjoy it fully.